Okay, so did you think about this randomized quicksort thing which I gave a description? So we all gone through it and understood how does it improve? Huh? So do you now understand why it is, how and why randomization helps in improving the running time? Okay, so there are some points which I didn't deliberately precisely define. Okay, for example, after choosing the pivotal element, you have to determine its correct position, and then you have to put elements into appropriate positions, either to the left or to the right. Now, how many comparisons do you think, okay, would all these require? Suppose you are starting with an n element array. Okay, so the way I wrote down the algorithm, it was something like determine the correct position of the pivotal element. That is done by comparing this element with every other element, and then by computing how many are less, you determine what is its correct position. After this, I said move all those which are less than these to the left of the correct position of the pivotal element, and all those which are more to the right of the correct position. Now again you involve comparisons. Okay. So comparison of the pivotal element with every other element, because to determine whether it is less or more, you have to make a comparison. Okay. So is it the number of comparisons 1 or 2? What do you think would be? No, just tell me some answer. It may be right or wrong. It does not matter.
Yeah. After we've chosen the pivotal element, the length of the array.
So we have this variable xij, which I claimed is the number of comparisons between ith smallest and jth smallest. Okay. Now can you determine? So I said it is 1, 0 or 1. There was some catch in that. Okay. If you look at this way of implementing the algorithm, first determine the correct position. So for that you will make a comparison between ith smallest and jth smallest, if one of them happens to be pivotal element, and then you have to move the smaller elements or larger elements to appropriate positions. For that you have to again make a comparison. So the number of comparisons will now become 2, but I said only 1. So there I did deliberately leave it, so just to see if any of you have noticed this. So can it be 1 or 2? Yeah? Huh? It is? Depends on the way of implementing. So how do you implement it? Yeah, so can you do it in just with one comparison between? Huh? Okay. So that is called in the language of C or where it is called, I think in his original paper he calls it as burning candles at both endpoints. So you have a pointer, okay, which tells you that all those to the left of the pointer are already occupied by elements which are less, and all those to the right of the right pointer, second pointer, are already occupied by larger elements. So if between left pointer and right pointer, if these two elements are elements which are out of place with respect to the sorted order, then you change them. So I think can be used to implement with just one comparison between pivotal element and any other element, which not only ensures that the pivotal element finds its correct place and also moves every other element into the appropriate subarray. Another way is, if you do not get into this, one can do a simpler argument by using an extra array. Okay. With this extra array, what you do is you first scan it and then find the correct position, After having found the correct position, what you do is whenever you encounter an element, again you do another sequence of comparisons. Whenever you find an element which is less, you keep two counters. One is for those which are less than the pivotal element, and another is for those number of elements which are so far more than that. And if you encounter an element which is less, you increment this counter, you move it to that place in that array. And similarly, if you find something which is more, you move it to the other sub position in the sub array to the right of the pivotal element. In this way, you will copy the entire array to the other array, and then you can transfer back. So, with an additional array, you can do it with two comparisons. It is easier to remember and to see why it requires. But anyway, you require that, you see that either it requires one comparison between pivotal element and any other element, or two comparisons. So, either it is 0 and 1 or 0 and 2. So, since it takes only one of these two values, if it takes 2, I can as well rename the variable, random variable, as instead of xij, I can rename it to be the number of comparisons divided by 2. So, it is 0 by 2 which is 0, or 2 by 2 which is 1. So, in any case it becomes indicator random variable. So, these are some finer details which you can think over and get clarified. Okay. So, the essence is that you are able to ensure that you can, for every permutation pi, you can, the randomized quicksort finds a sorted array, sorts the elements in the array with a number of comparisons which is expected number of comparisons by the randomized quicksort is just theta of n log n. This is what you, this is the important point. Okay. So, this is an example of a so called what we call a Las Vegas algorithm. So, what we do here is we have designed an algorithm for which we cannot guarantee on the running time, we cannot provide any guarantee on the running time. The only guarantee that we can provide is say n squared. Okay. We know that between any pair they are being compared at most a constant number of times, either 1 or 2 or 0. Okay. And hence and the expected number of times you make comparisons is only n log n. Since it is only 0 or 1 or 2 and each comparison moves them to the correct order. Okay. So, you know that at the end you will not make more than n squared comparisons, that is the only guarantee we can give. Apart from that, we cannot give any other guarantee that it will not make more than say n times square root of n comparisons or n power 7 by 4 comparisons and so forth. Whenever you make, if you want to make such a guarantee, this guarantee will only be, this statement will only hold true with some probability. Okay. For example, from this statement one can show that the probability that the algorithm for all pi, permutation pi, the probability that Ta of pi is more than n times square root of n is upper bounded by a well known inequality in probability theory known as Markov's inequality. So, it says that if you have a non-negative valued random variable, then the probability that it takes a value which is at least t is upper bounded by the expectation of the random value. So, the expectation here is theta of n log n divided by n times square root of n. So, it comes to something like log n by square root of n, ignoring the, this is what you can guarantee. So, you can only say that with probability at least 1 minus this value, the number of comparisons that you will make is at most n times square root of n. So, you can make a statement like you can provide an upper bound on the number of comparisons, but that will not be with full confidence. You can only say that with probability 1 minus theta of n log, theta of log n by square root of n. So, this is what we call, whatever that you can provide upper bound, it only comes with some guarantee, probable confidence in the probability. It does not come with absolute confidence. Absolute confidence corresponds to probability 1, that you cannot ensure. So, what you have here is something like you have a guarantee on the correctness, with probability 1 it will produce a correct output, but you cannot guarantee on the running time, running time can vary anywhere between small value to n squared. One can of course provide guarantees that it will not exceed something. Such types of randomized algorithms are what we call Las Vegas randomized algorithms. Okay. There are other types of algorithms, another type of algorithms which is known as Monte Carlo algorithms. So, in the Monte Carlo algorithms, so here this is useful for those scenarios where which the correctness of the answer is crucial, very important. You do not want to compromise on the correctness of the answer, but you do not mind spending more time with the confidence that the probability that you will spend more time is very, very low. So, you can as well take the risk. So, with that confidence you are willing to take some risk and allow the algorithm to take more time, even though that happens with a very low probability, but you are very particular that the correctness is not compromised. So, such are called Las Vegas algorithm. Another is what we call a Monte Carlo algorithm. Here the running time is crucial. You cannot afford to spend too much time. Okay, you are having a randomized algorithm, you want to use this algorithm to solve a problem, but you do not want to spend too much time. So, what you do is you design the algorithm in such a way that it always runs within some stipulated time. Okay, you design the algorithm in this fashion. As a consequence of that, what you have is that the algorithm you can only guarantee on the give a guarantee on the correctness of the answer. You cannot claim that the answer will always be correct with probability 1, then it becomes almost a deterministic algorithm. Okay, a deterministic algorithm is what you have. So, why do you apply randomness? To increase efficiency. Okay, the very fact that you do not have improved algorithms, deterministic algorithm, is one reason why you go for randomized algorithm. So, this is where you want to compromise on the correctness of the answer, but you are particular that the running time does not shoot up beyond this. Okay. So, we will see one such algorithm. So, that is, let us look at this. So, let us consider 3 matrices A, B, C, okay, and let us assume that they are n by n matrices with entries from a field F, a finite field F. Okay. And you want to know, okay, the goal of the problem is verify, the computational problem is verify given A and B, C if the product of the first 2 matrices is the third matrix. Okay, this is what you want to verify. Now, we know that there are algorithms. Okay, we know the definition of the matrix multiplication translates to a order of n cube algorithm. Here we assume that the multiplication of two elements from F or addition of 2 elements from F, all these can be done in constant time. We do not count the amount of time taken to do this. So, we assume that the amount of time is constant. So, we only focus on the number of elementary operations. Elementary operation is multiplication of elements in F or addition of elements in F. So, the straightforward algorithm of taking a row and a column here and take their inner product will require, okay, order of n cube time, we have seen yesterday. Okay. And of course, there are more sophisticated algorithm based on algebraic arguments, okay, using tensors and linear forms, particularly the algorithm of I think Solvay and Strassen, and later it was improved by one more person, Solvay and Strassen, one more person. So, the currently best known algorithm takes running time which is something like, if my memory is correct, order of n power 2.376. Okay, the best known algorithm as of date, a deterministic algorithm. Okay, and it is still more than n squared. Okay. So, now is there a using randomization can you come up with a more efficient algorithm? Okay. You will see an example of this. Okay. So, this is based on algebraic approach. A direct definition would give you order of n cube, and I think this divide and conquer, I think this divide and conquer is also applicable to this n power log 7 to the base 2, okay, divided into 4 submatrices of size n by 2 each, and then you do not compute all 8 products. What dominates the running time is the product of the submatrices, but not the addition. So, you do not compute all 8 products, but we only compute 7 and compute the remaining 8 product from these, some combination of these. That gets you log of n power log 7 to the base 2. Log 7 to the base 2 is less than 3, okay, but still it is I think more than 2.5 or 2 more than 2. Okay. I think it should be more than this. Now, we want to know if one can indeed get an algorithm which whose running time is n squared. N squared is the minimum that you will require, because there are 3 n by n matrices. Even to read them and you make use of all of them, because you to compute the product you need to do that. So, you have to have at least order of n squared time, there is a bound. So, can you do that? Indeed, randomization helps you in that. So, what if the algorithm is very simple? Okay. Choose uniformly at random. So, whenever I write UAR, it is a short term expression for uniformly at random, a vector R in 0, 1 or n, okay, where 0 is the additive identity of the field F and 1 is the multiplicative identity. Okay. And then what you do is compute AB R, which is basically A times BR, and compute CR, check if ABR equals CR, if so output AB equals C, otherwise no. Okay. This is what you have. So, what you do is you take a uniformly at random a 0 1 vector and compute this product ABR. So, now recall that B is a n by n matrix, R is a I think of this as a column vector n by 1 matrix. So, n by n matrix with the multiplied by a column vector will give you a n by 1 column vector. Now, take that column vector again, post multiply the matrix A with that column vector, again get a column vector n by 1, and do this for CR, you get a column vector n by 1, and just check if these two column vectors are the same, and if so output AB equals C, otherwise no. Now, let us look at this algorithm and analyze it for curves and time. Okay. So, what about time? If you look at the time complexity, so we know that ABR can be computed by first computing BR and then take the column vector and post multiply A with that. Computing BR will require how much time? N squared. You have to compute n inner products. So, n squared time, and after n squared time what you get is a column vector. Again you do another multiplication, this will also take another n squared time. So, for a total of n squared plus n squared time, because we are interested in the asymptotic behavior. So, n squared time. Okay. This will be different from if you try to compute AB first. The best known algorithm will require something like n power 2.376, and then you will require an additional n squared time. but that will take it to be more than n power 2.376. So, you do not do this, that is the point here. So, you just do this in order of n square time, you are able to compute this, and computation of this will also require another order of n squared. And then what are you doing? You have two column vectors, you are comparing them. Okay. Again, comparison is a unit operation. So, we assume that it can be done in constant time. So, again an order of n. So, for a total of order of n squared time. So, in order of n squared time, the algorithm will give you an answer. It never takes more than n squared time. Okay. That is the way you have designed the algorithm. You have a full guarantee that the algorithm will never take more than n squared time. Now, what about the correctness? Okay. If you look at the correctness, what do you have here? Suppose AB equals C, then if AB equals C, then ABR should be equal to CR. Okay. These two would be equal. Since these two are equal, what happens is you will only output AB equals C. So, in the scenario that the product of A and B equals C, your answer will always be correct. There is no doubt about that. Okay. So, if AB equals C, then output is correct. But you could make an error if AB is not equal to C. Okay. It is possible that AB is not equal to C, still you can find an R such that AB R equals CR. Why? It is basically similar to, if AB is not equal to C, then that means if you look at just this matrix AB minus C, let me define it to be D, then what it says is that D will not be equal to 0. If AB is C, then D would be identically the 0 matrix. So, obviously, any vector multiplied with that will give you a 0 vector, but if AB is not equal to C, then D will not be 0 matrix, but for non-zero matrix, okay, with non-zero entities, you can very well find vectors R, which when multiplied with that will give you 0. Okay, it is possible. What if R happens to be 0 vector? What if R happens to be 0 vector? If R happens to be 0 vector, because you are choosing uniformly at random is 0 1 vector, turn out to be 0 vector and this will turn out to be 0 vector, and you will only output yes, even though you know that the answer is no, correct answer should be no, but then that happens with very low probability. R being 0, okay. What is this? Choosing uniformly at random. How many choices are there for R? 2 power n. Okay, it is a n vector where each of the entities can take either 0 or 1. There is 2 power n vector. So, you are looking at one possibility of 0 vector among 2 power n vectors. The probability of that happening is very, very low. One can in fact prove something stronger. In fact, what we can show is if AB is not equal to C, then probability that ABR equals CR is at most half. So, if the two matrices are not equal, then the probability that a randomly chosen vector gets you the answer yes, where in fact it should be no, is upper bounded by half. Okay. So, what it says is with probability more than half or at least half, if AB is not equal to C, the answer would be ABR is not equal to CR, and hence the answer would be no here. So, the algorithm outputs a correct answer if a b is not equal to c with probability at least half. Okay. If a b equals c, the algorithm, the answer given by the algorithm is correct with probability 1. Okay. If a b equals c, then you know that these two will be equal, and hence you will only output yes, there is no doubt about it. So, if a b equals c, the answer given by the algorithm is correct with probability 1, but if a b is not equal to c, the answer given by the algorithm is could be wrong, but the probability that it is wrong is only upper bounded by half. So, with probability at least half, it is likely to give a correct answer. Okay. And this is a very guarantee. Okay. With probability half is a quite a good guarantee. In fact, one can improve this guarantee half to any number as close to 1 as possible by repeated trials of this algorithm. We will come to that later. Okay. But suffice to know that it gives you an answer, correct answer with probability at least half, that is very important. Okay. So, now let us see this. Why is this true? Let us see the proof of this, a simple argument. So, if a b is not equal to c, then we know that d is not equal to 0. If d is not equal to 0, then you know that at least one entry in the matrix should be a non-zero entry. Okay. And what we will do is, we will assume without loss of generality that that non-zero entry is the first entry, that is D11 of this. Okay. This we can assume by relabeling the columns and rows numbers. Okay. So, we will assume without loss of generality D11 is not equal to 0. Okay. If D11 is not equal to 0, okay, which means the first row of the matrix D is a non-zero vector, and what you get is, for this non-zero vector multiplied by this randomly chosen vector, you get a 0, because the entire thing, this the basically ABR equals CR is equal to saying AB minus C times R is 0, which is equal to saying DR is 0. If DR is 0, then the first entry of the product DR would be the value obtained by taking the first row and the inner product of the first row and the random vector R. Okay. So, now let us look at that. What do you get out of this? 0 is, okay, D11 times R1, this is the random first component of the random vector, okay, sorry, this plus I greater than 2 D1I Ri, I greater than 2 D1I Ri divided by D11. D11, because D11 is non-zero, I have assumed this to be non-zero, and we are talking about a field. Okay. So, every non-zero element has a multiplicative inverse. So, you multiply by the multiplicative inverse, that is equal to dividing by tu, that is what we mean by dividing. Okay. Well, so what does this say? It says that for this summation, this is the inner product, to be 0, you have to satisfy this, that the first component of the random vector R1 should be equal to this, it should satisfy this condition. Now, what is the probability that this happens? Because this is equal to this, these two are the same, just you are rearranging the components here and there. So, the probability of this happening is same as the probability of this happening. So, now the question, what is the probability that R1 is equal to this? Okay. Now, I can view it as follows. What I do is, you have this entire space. Okay. Now, what I do is, I divide it into, okay, 2 power n minus 1 subspaces, mutually exclusive positive subspaces. Okay. So, you have the space of entire space of 2 power n possible vectors for R. I divide it into and so forth into 2 power n minus 1 subspaces. So, in each of the 2 power n minus 1 subspaces, the values of I1i for I equals 2, sorry, I is greater than 1 here. For I equals 2 through n, they are all fixed, okay, they are all fixed. So, what is random about it? The random is in the no, not Ri, the values of Ri are all fixed, okay. There are Ri from R2 through Rn, there are n minus 1 values, you fix these values. How many ways you can fix them? 2 power n minus 1 ways. For each of them, now you choose R1 randomly. So, each of them is a space with just 2 vectors, depending on whether R1 equals 0 or R1 equals 1, okay. Now, and this is a division of the entire space into 2 power n minus 1 mutually exclusive, okay, and exclusive in the sense that they are disjoint, any two of them are paired disjoint, and exhaustive, the entire space is covered by this. Now, what is it that you want? You want to estimate the probability of this event, probability that R1 equals this value. This is an event, okay. If you look at this event, okay, then it is somewhere here like this. You look at its, what is the probability of A? I call this event as A, R1 equals the summation divided by this. Then you look at its intersections with each of these. Then probability of A is probability of A1 intersection with this, probability of A1 intersection with this, and so forth, okay. So, you get again 2 power n minus 1 summations. These 2 power n minus 1 summations, what you can do is what you do is, in each of these subspaces there are only 2 values, there are only 2 vectors, they are decided by the values of R1, R1 equals 0, R1 equals 1, and each of them occurs with equal probability, okay. Now, so what is the probability that R1 equals this? You know that R1 is always chosen to be either 0 or 1, but for some specific values of R2 through Rn, it may so happen that this may not evaluate to either 0 or 1, this may evaluate to something else. If it evaluates to something else, okay, which means if it happens, then that particular event, sub event, will not be having any intersection with A, which means the contribution to the probability is 0. Otherwise, it evaluates to either 0 or 1, it evaluates to unique value. So, there are only 3 possibilities here. This summation evaluates to 0, or the summation evaluates to 1, by summation I mean summation divided by this value, or this evaluates to something which is neither 0 nor 1. If it evaluates to neither 0 nor 1, then the probability that R1 equals that is 0, because you choose R only from these values, the probability is 0 happening there. Otherwise, what happens? You are choosing R1 to be one of the 2 values, 0 or 1. If this evaluates to 0, the probability that you choose R1 to be 0 is half. If this evaluates to 1, the probability you choose is half. In any case, it never becomes more than half. That is the reason. That is for one particular intersection of A with one particular sub event. And what is the probability of A? Probability of A is nothing but the summation over all possible sub events, their intersections with A. And for each of the sub events, the common intersection has a probability at most half, okay, and the total probability would be basically half times the conditional probability is half. Since the conditional probability is half and you are multiplying by the probability of this event, either if this intersection happens to be 0, then it does not play a role, or it gets, so let me put it this way, probability of A is, okay, probability of I equals 1 to 2e power n minus 1, probability of A intersection Bi. Ba has these mutually exclusive subdivisions, and then I will ignore those components for which A intersection Ba is 0, they are not going to contribute. So, probability I from 1 to 2 power n minus 1 and A intersection Bi is non-empty, probability of A intersection BI. But probability of A intersection BI we know is probability of A given BI times probability of BI. Okay. And I know that this is not 0, okay, and hence no, I do not even need this, BI will always, yeah, and I know that this is at most of for every I, that is what we have just seen. Since this is at most of, what happens is this is at most of times summation over all I probability of BA. Okay, this is what you have. So this you can divide because these are all mutually exclusive and exhaustive. This you know from probability theory, and this one can write it in this fashion. And each BA has some non-zero probability. So even if you don't understand, you just remember that once you condition all the other components, the probability of this happening is at most of, and hence you can vary the other component for all possible values. There are 2 power n minus 1 choices, and you will get this. So you get at most of, which is, we know that this is 1, so of. So probability that ABR equals CR, if AB happens to be not equal to C, is at most of. Is this clear? So this is only analysis. The crucial point here is that this point, it is a matter of detail to understand this, but this is the important thing. The conclusion is that probability of this happening is at most of. Okay. So what does that say? It says that if you introduce randomness, okay, then you can improve the running time from the currently best known deterministic algorithm, which has something like 2 power n power 2.376, you can improve it to order of n squared, which is nearly the best. You need at least n squared time. The only catch is that when AB is not equal to C, you cannot take the answer as it is given. You have to accept it only with some confidence. You know that it is likely to be false with probability at most of. You have to be aware of that. Otherwise, it gives you a correct improved algorithm. So this is an example of what we call a Monte Carlo algorithm. Its running time is guaranteed to be upper bounded by n squared, but the correctness of the answer, even here you see the correctness is in doubt only when AB is not equal to C. If AB equal to C, there is no doubt about the correctness. But that is as far as the, if you look at it from that side. If you look at it from this side, as someone who applies this algorithm and gets the answer, it is the other way. So what happens is, if the algorithm gives the answer no, then he can infer that AB is not equal to C. Okay. If AB equals C, the algorithm will never give the answer no. So if the algorithm gives the answer no, then he can infer that the answer is indeed AB is not equal to C. But if the algorithm gives AB equals C as the output, then there is a possibility that the answer is wrong. So the roles are changed when you look at it from the user's point of view, so as someone who uses the algorithm and uses the results given by the algorithm. Okay. From an algorithm designer point of view, it is the other way. If AB equals C, the answer is always correct. If AB is not equal to C, the answer is likely to be wrong with some low probability. But from a user's point of view, if the output you get is AB is not equal to C, then you can take it with full confidence. It is indeed true that AB is not equal to C. On the other hand, if the output of the algorithm turns out to be AB equals C, then you know that this answer is likely to be wrong, but even though that probability is bounded by half, there could be some error in that. So in that case, what you do is, you don't want to, sometimes suppose you don't want to you are willing to spend more time, little more time, but you would like to boost the confidence in your answer. So, what you can do is, okay, if the output is AB equals C, then it is possible that AB is not equal to C indeed, and the algorithm gives the wrong answer of AB equals C. So, what you do is, so there is some possibility of error by the algorithm. So, what you do is, you repeat the algorithm once more. When you repeat the algorithm once more, at this point what you do is you use independent coin tosses. Okay. Now, I have not really talked about connecting coin tosses. So, I often interchangeably use the words bits, random bits and coin tosses. Okay. Random bits and coin tosses, these are essentially the same. A bit can be thought of as taking a value 0 or 1 with some probability, that I can interpret that as a tossing a coin. If it falls head, I interpret that as 1, and if it falls 0, falls tail, I interpret that as 1 with some with associated probability. Okay. I normally use, sometimes I use talk in terms of bits, sometimes I talk in terms of coin tosses. So, you should figure out what I mean that in both cases. Essentially it is random bit. Now, so what you do is, so here how many random bits you require? You require n random bits. Okay. Now, what are the assumptions about the random bits? We assume that all the random bits are independent. Okay. All the random bits are for probability that R1 equals 0 or 1, R1 is unbiased, R1 is a truly unbiased random bit, R2 is a truly unbiased random bit, and so forth. You can replace it with that weaker assumption, even then it will hold true. Okay. We do not use independence anywhere in the proof arguments. Okay. We do not use independence. All that required is that you read a sequence of random bits which need not be independent, but you should be assured that R1 equals 0 or 1 with probability of, R2 equals 0 or 1 with probability of, this should be true for every each of the random bits. Okay. Even then all these conclusions hold true. In any case, what you can do is, so with n bits, whether they are totally independent or not, you are able to ensure that the answer is wrong with only with probability at most of, only in the scenario that AB is not equal to C. Okay. Now, what you do is, if you get an answer AB equals C, you are in doubt whether the answer is right or wrong. So, what you do is you repeat the experiment again with another sequence of n random bits, but which are expected to be totally independent of all these random bits. Okay. Why do you expect them to be totally independent is that later on we would like to, what we do is, in one iteration the probability of giving a wrong answer is at most of. What is the probability that in the second iteration also it gives a wrong answer? That is again at most of. So, what is the probability that it gives a wrong answer in both iterations? Okay. It is 1/4. So, in this way one can bring down the failure probability by repeating the algorithm k times. One can bring down the failure probability to be 1 over 2 power k. So, how does the algorithm look like now? You iterate the algorithm k times with k independent sequences of random bits of length n each, and then what you do is, if ever you get the answer out of these k iterations, if ever you get the answer AB is not equal to C, then you know that the answer is indeed that AB is not equal to C, because if AB equals C, then each of the k iterations it should only give the answer AB equals C. So, it will never give AB is not equal to C. If you ever get AB is not equal to C by the algorithm, you can take the answer blindly. If in each of the iterations it gave AB equal to C, then what is the probability that it is indeed AB is not equal to C, but the algorithm manages to give AB equals C in each of the k iterations? It means in each of the k iterations it makes an error, and that error is happening with probability of, since these coin tosses are all independent for independent trials, the probability that it makes an error in each of the k trials is 1 over 2 power k. So, you can bring down the failure probability from at most being at most of to something like 1 over 2 power k by spending, instead of order of n square, you now spend order of k n square times. You are able to bring down the failure probability to something as small as 1 over 2 power k. So, you can choose this k so that 1 over 2 power k is whatever threshold confidence that you want to have. You do not want to the probability of error being never more than some epsilon, then you want this 1 over 2 power k to be at most epsilon. Choose k so that 1 over 2 power k is at most epsilon, and repeat it that many trials with that many independent sequences of random bits. Okay. So, this is one example of what we have as boosting the success probability with independent trials of the same algorithm. Okay. But okay, now let us look at another example. So, a very simple problem, okay, where you have this randomization really helps you to improve efficiency. Okay. Suppose you have an array A, okay, of so n real values. Okay, n real values. Now, you want to know if this array has what we call a majority element. Okay. These real values need not be distinct, a majority element. What is a majority element? An element which appears more than n by 2 times, okay, more than n by 2 times. Now, think of any algorithm, a deterministic algorithm which finds, first of all it has to determine if there is a majority element, and if there is a majority element it has to find this. Okay. Now, there are two problems associated with this. One is, does A have a majority? Find the majority. The majority has to be a unique element. Okay. You cannot have two distinct majorities, because find the majority if it exists. Third is, another related problem is, given x, find if x is the majority for A. Now, let us look at these questions. Now, just let us look at the last one. So, either of these. Okay. Given x, find if x is the majority for A. Now, what do you think would be a best deterministic algorithm will require to solve this? Yeah? Huh?
Basically, comparing it with all,
Comparing it with?
checking if it is equal to all the elements in the array. So
Yeah. If you check it, then you will have to do n minus equality test or n equality test. You have to check if x is equal to each of these elements. So, n equality test. So, is it possible to do better than n? Yeah. Which n by 2? First n by 2. Okay. So, check with it is the first n by 2. Okay. If it equals the first n by 2, then you have to have more than n by 2. So, okay, let us assume that you check with the first n by 2 plus 1. If it equals, then you know that it is a majority. What happens if it does not equal? Huh? Two times at least. No, a majority should be repeated more than n by 2 times. The number of occurrences should be more than n by 2. Yeah, you compare it with which n by 2 plus 1? The first n by 2 plus. Okay.
And if it matches equals two of them, then
Ah.
output it is majority.
If it matches two of them, how just by comparing with two of them you can determine if it is a majority?
Okay, it should match greater than or equal to 2.
Huh?
It should be equal to greater than or equal to 2.
Greater than 2 by 2, n by 2. A majority is one which occurs more than n by 2 times.
Sorry, I am comparing it only with n by 2 plus 1 elements.
Okay, n by 2 plus 1. Okay.
And if it is matching greater than or equal to 2,
Okay, one can do this. I think if in 2n equality test one can easily do. One can, I think one can even do it with 3n by 2 equality test. If I remember correct, if I am not wrong, then with just 3n by 2 equality test, there is a deterministic algorithm which does more than 3n by 2 equality test and correctly determines. No, wait a minute. Sorry, which problem we are addressing? I forgot. Which problem? Are we addressing this or this or this? What is the thing that we are looking at? Third one, sorry, okay. Third one, how many equality tests do we need to get the answer if X is a majority? You just require n equality test, okay, n equality test. There is a deterministic algorithm which simply compares with each entry and finds the answer. You keep a counter which counts the number of times it has occurred, and if number is more than n by 2, you know it is a majority, otherwise it is not a majority. Okay. So, that is an upper bound on it, the deterministic complexity, because there is a deterministic algorithm which it does, which uses just n by n equality test and correctly finds if X is a majority or not. Suppose I in fact claim that there is a lower bound also. The lower bound is that I claim that no deterministic algorithm, okay, can correctly determine the answer if X is a majority or not by just doing only less than n by 2 equality test. Less than n by 2, okay, it is anything less than n by 2. N by 2 minus 1, if n happens to be even, then you take it to be n by 2 minus 1. You can never do that. So, can you think why it is true?
There can't be more than one majority element.
Yeah, of course.
So if you search only less than n by 2, then the rest of it can be some other element and that can form a majority. The adversary can always give you.
No, there can be more than one majority. Okay, then.
It cannot be more than one majority. So if you search less than n by 2 elements, like you can always frame the other n by 2 elements in such a way that you get some other element as majority.
Very good. That is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. It is still not formal or rigorous enough, but you can formalize it. The intuition is correct. The point here is, you take any deterministic algorithm, okay. So, and this deterministic algorithm, somebody comes up with a deterministic algorithm and tries to fool you saying that I have a deterministic algorithm which does not more than n by 2, no, which does less than n by 2 equality test, and which will always correctly determine given x and a whether x is a majority or not. Okay. The point here is, if it looks at less than n by 2 entries, then there are still more than n by 2 entries which it has not looked at. Okay. Now, if it says yes here, x is indeed a majority here, then you can fill up the remaining more than n by 2 entries with an element which is other than x. Since you have looked at only less than n by 2 entries, there are more than n by 2 entries which you have not looked at, and they are all going to be filled up with something other than x, and that is going to be the majority. So, x will not be a majority. Okay. X will not be a majority. So, if the algorithm claims x is a majority, then you can refute it by this. On the other hand, if the algorithm claims that x is not a majority, then you can do the same argument, fill up the remaining more than n by 2 all with x, then x happens to be the majority. In any case, whatever the answer that algorithm gives, you can refute it by this. You have to be little more formal. This is not formal enough, but you know how you have to be very formal in this. So, what you do is you take any deterministic algorithm, then you know that the first entry that it is going to look at is always going to be fixed, some deterministic choice, and depending on the answer outcome with that entry, the equality test that it performs there, it is going to look at something else depending on any case. In any case, you do not look at more than n by 2. So, whatever that it looks at, the remaining all can be, it has not looked at, you can fill up with that remaining. So, the more formal rigorous is that. Okay. So, for there are you can come up with two distinct arrays, okay, and these two distinct arrays agree on less than n by 2 entries, and if you feed both of these arrays to the algorithm will only look at these entries, and hence it will give the same answer because it has looked at the same entries and both it agrees on, both arrays agree on all these entries, it is going to give the same answer, but by manipulating the remaining entries you can get two different answers, and hence the algorithm can be refuted. So, no deterministic algorithm will perform this. Okay. But if you choose a look at a randomized algorithm, what it can do is, if there is indeed a majority, it just picks up uniformly at random a position and compares the entry in that position with x. Okay. What is the probability that that entry is equal to x? It will be at least half if x happens to be majority. Okay. So, if x happens to be majority, so you pick up uniformly at random a position r, and a of r equals x is at least half. And hence what you can design the algorithm in this way, you pick uniformly at random a position and output, if it happens to be x, output yes, otherwise output it no. Now, just as we have two different scenarios, you have two different scenarios here. If x is majority, probability that a of r equals x is at least half, and hence the answer is correct with probability at least half, and wrong with probability less than, that you can ensure. In fact, we can say that it is strictly more than half because we have n by 2. This is what we have. What happens if x is not majority? If x is not the majority, what will be the probability that A of r equals to x? Huh? Less than half. Probability that A of r equals x is less than half. If it is equal to x, it says less than half. And what does that mean? It says x is indeed a majority. So, as a result, what happens? The answer becomes what is the answer? If x is not a majority and A of r equal happens to be x, and the output, as a result, the output is yes, x is a majority. So, what is the answer? Is it right or wrong? It is wrong. So, the answer is wrong. Wrong. What is the probability? With probability less than half. With probability less than half. And hence, what happens? With probability more than half, the answer would be correct, because more than half of the entries happens to be entries which are not x, and in each of these cases, the algorithm will say no, x is not a majority, and it is indeed a correct answer. Okay. So, the answer is correct with probability more than half. In any case, we are not interested in this, we are interested in the correctness of probability of correctness or wrong answers, correct answers or wrong answer. What happens? Independent of whether x is majority, the answer is correct with probability more than half and wrong with probability less than half. Okay. So, you have a randomized algorithm which does just one equality test, okay, and gives you a correct answer, whereas a deterministic algorithm will have to perform more than n by 2, or rather equal to or more than n by 2 in equality test to come up with a correct answer. Okay. The only thing here, deterministic algorithm by its very nature will always give the correct answer, because someone says that he has designed deterministic algorithm, the first thing that you check is that it is correct or not. So, that is ensured always. So, there is no doubt about the correctness. What happens is that the running time cannot be bounded, it size of the input, whereas a randomized algorithm, it improves the efficiency significantly. It just does just one test and is able, but the catch is that the answer that it gives could be right or wrong, and you can only give an upper bound on the probability of giving a incorrect answer. The probability of giving incorrect answer is 0. You can only provide an upper bound of say half or something. Okay. Now, of course, you can boost the failure or success probability of these, okay, by repeated. Again, you can think about these, very similar to what we have done here. But the point here is, even if you are able to boost it, there is no way that you can be absolutely sure of the answer. That happens here. It happens here also. Okay. You can bring down the failure probability to be at most 1 over 2 power k by doing k independent trials. Still, you can only upper bound it to be 1 over 2 power k. You cannot upper bound it to be 0. Okay. There is always this incorrect thing. The point here in both of these is that in both of these, how do you verify that correct or not? That is in fact the goal of the problem. Okay. If the algorithm says here a b equals c, how do you verify? That is indeed the goal of the problem. So, you cannot verify that, you have to accept it with something. Okay. And similarly here you can only, you cannot verify it, because as we have just seen, even if the so in this case, even if you are given X candidate majority, it takes more than n by 2 comparisons to verify if it is correctly, if it is a majority or not. So, there is no deterministic, efficient deterministic verification algorithms in both of these. That is why you go for random solutions, okay, either here or here. So, this this is in the nature of these two problems, but you can think of other scenarios where you have efficient verification algorithms. Okay. For example, you know NP, what is NP? Class of non-deterministic polynomial time solvable problems. Okay. Is there anyone who does not know NP, who is not aware of NP? Okay. In NP class, you know that most of the problems are NP hard or NP complete. No. Let me put it this way. Problems which are known to be NP. Every other problem that came about to algorithm designers, post to algorithm designers by practitioners to be NP complete or NP hard. Okay. Now, so it is generally believed that P is not equal to NP, which means all of these so called hard problems, hard in the sense that they are either NP hard or NP complete, have no hope of being solved by an efficient deterministic polynomial time algorithm. Okay. But what characterizes all of these problems is that each of their instances with a yes answer have a efficiently verifiable certificate. Okay. For example, if you take the example of 3 coloring, given an arbitrary graph G, you want to know if the graph is 3 colorable or not. Okay. It is NP complete, to this problem is NP complete, but there are efficient algorithms, in fact linear time algorithms, which given an arbitrary 3 coloring verifies whether it is a proper 3 coloring. A proper 3 coloring is a coloring of the vertices such that adjacent vertices get distinct colors. Okay. So, these are characterized by efficient verification algorithms. Here you do not have even this verification, in fact the okay. Now, in these scenarios what happens, a class of graphs, okay, a class of graphs where the number of proper 3 colorings is quite a significant fraction of the total number of 3 colorings. Okay. What is the total number of 3 colorings? What is a coloring, 3 coloring? You just give one of the colors 1, 2, 3 to any of the vertices. So, how many ways, how many 3 colorings are there? Huh? 3 power n. Okay. Each vertex can get one of the 3 power n colorings possible. But you are interested if one of them is proper. By proper, what we mean is that any pair of adjacent vertices should not get the same color, and determining if this is NP complete. But if for some class of graphs colorings, proper 3 colorings is at least a good fraction, say 1/10 of the total number of 3 colorings, then you have an efficient randomized algorithm to solve this problem for this class of graphs. And there are indeed graphs which require, which had quite a good number of 3 colorings. For example, totally empty graph, every 3 coloring is a proper 3 coloring, and one can come up with a choice of class definition of graphs where the number of 3 colorings is quite huge. Okay. Now, in all of these, suppose you have a class C of graphs in illustration of a more general phenomenon. Okay. So, this so through this illustration example I am trying to educate you about a more general phenomenon, scenarios where randomization is quite powerful. Okay. So, what you have is, if C is a class of graphs, for all graph G in C, okay, the number of proper pre-colorings divided by number of 3 colorings is at least say 1/4, for example. Then what I claim is that for such class of graphs, okay, you can come up with a randomized algorithm which efficiently finds a proper 3 coloring. Okay. See, the very fact that number of proper 3 coloring is at least 1/4 of the total number of 3 coloring does not immediately tell you deterministic algorithm to find it. It is very similar to this. Okay. You could have more than n by 2 entries filled with the same x, still you will not be able to verify for yourself that it is indeed true by just looking at less than n by 2 entries. Maybe for every deterministic algorithm there are 2 choice of vectors in which the answer could vary. So, no deterministic algorithm can safely claim that by looking at less than n by 2 entries it will correctly determine the answer. A similar arguments can be worked out for this scenario also. Okay. So, it is very unlikely yeah. See, I do not claim that C happens to be a solving 3 colorability for C is NP complete, that I do not claim. What we know is that 3 colorability is NP complete for the class of all graphs or for the class of planar graphs, or even if you restrict your attention further to for the class of all 4 regular planar graphs, that much is known. I do not claim that. The purpose here is to give you an illustration of this. Okay. It can be NP column because I have not specified what this class of graphs. I am talking a more general scenario. Even if you have a efficient deterministic algorithm, maybe the deterministic algorithm can take quite a large amount of time. As in this case, there is a deterministic algorithm to check majority, but it takes n equality tests. The purpose here is to illustrate that the power of randomness can help you to speed up the efficiency, running time. So, here you can use a similar argument. What you do is you simply uniformly at random choose a 3 coloring. Okay. That you can, what you have to do is for every vertex uniformly at random assign it with one of the 3 colors 1, 2, 3. This is a uniform choice over the all possible 3 colorings. What is the probability that the randomly chosen coloring 3 coloring is indeed a proper 3 coloring? That 1/10, 1/4 because of this assumption. So, since this probability is at least 1/4, here comes the difference between that problem and this problem. Here what you can do is you can verify if the answer is correct or not, because verification of an arbitrary 3 coloring can be done in linear time. We just have to scan through all edges of the graph and check if the 2 endpoints get different colors or the same color. Okay. Verification can be done in linear time, and if it turns out to be not proper, you can again repeat the algorithm again and again. Here the advantage here is that one can use this idea to design a Las Vegas algorithm for finding a proper 3 coloring in this case, which you do not have any such hope in these 2 instances. Okay. Why? You just first look at the first iteration, it will happen to be a proper 3 coloring with probability at least 1/4. If not, you again repeat the algorithm, okay, with independent coin tosses. Okay. Then what is the probability that it turns out to be a proper coloring? It will be at least 1/4. So, what is the probability of making an error? 1 minus 1/4, which is 3/4. So, if at any iteration you get a proper 3 coloring, you stop there, you have found a proper 3 coloring, your goal is served. So, you can stop there and exit, and if you do not, you keep on doing this again and again, okay, until you find a proper 3 coloring. This algorithm can potentially go on infinitely, because in each iteration with positive probability, which is with some positive probability, you do have a non-proper 3 coloring and you have a positive probability of choosing that, okay, it can go on. Still, what is the expected number of trials of this algorithm? You can verify that the expected number of trials of this algorithm is very less, very less. What is the success probability in any iteration? It is 1/4. Okay, one can think of this as something like tossing a coin. If it falls head, then you consider it to be success, otherwise you consider it to be failure. Probability of success here is 1/4. Okay, you keep on tossing the coin until it falls head. What is expected before you encounter a hit? That is 1/p. Okay, 1/p, which means the expected number of trials you have to repeat this algorithm is expected number of trials is 4. Okay, with just 4 on the average number of trials, you will come up with a proper 3 coloring. But you have to be careful. I only say the expected number of trials is 4. Okay, actual number of trials can potentially become very large, even though the probability that this happens can be bounded to be very low. There is a possibility, but this is the important difference between deterministic scenario and randomized scenario, particularly in the case of these things. So, what you get is a Las Vegas randomized algorithm. What are the two points about Las Vegas algorithm? It is that it always produces a correct answer, which you are able to ensure, because you keep on executing the algorithm again and again until you find a 3 coloring. The algorithm will stop only if it finds a 3 coloring. Okay. So, the algorithm, if it ever produces an output, it will be a correct output. Okay, that much is guaranteed. So, there is no doubt about the correctness. What about the running time? You cannot bound it, but you can bound the expected running time. The expected running time is essentially determined by the expected number of trials, because each trial costs only linear time. You just verify the properness, which requires only n square time. So, the expected number of trials is upper bounded by 4. So, this is a significant improvement over what you could otherwise think of. A deterministic, perhaps for this class of graphs, deterministic algorithm may be able to, even though nobody may be able to prove it, because if you have proved it, then you have established that P is not equal to NP. But it is very likely that in case P is not equal to NP, it is very likely that you will come up with some such lower bound. So, what you have here is an improvement, significant improvement. Okay, we will see some more examples in the next lectures.